The Z-Stacks, for their type, are the most devious tugs afloat. And Zack is the cutthroat among these malefactors that racketeer the big city port. This is Zack. Continuing from our last Z-Stack focused episode of Tugs A Deep Dive, today I wanted to talk about Zack, the somewhat forgotten member of the Zero Fleet. We all know who he is, but there isn't much depth to his character. Or is there? Well, that's exactly what we're going to analyse today and see just how much underused potential that there may be with this bad boy. If you enjoy this video and want to see more like it, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and ring Toby's bell to stay notified for when I post new content. Now let's get started. So what type of character is Zack? Well, the Z-Stacks serve as the primary antagonists of the show, and Zack is perhaps the most antagonistic of them all. I have already gone into detail on why I think that Zoran is the perfect antagonist, largely thanks to how layered his character is. Zack, on the other hand, is a clear-cut bad guy, and much more of an actual villain, as opposed to an antagonist. Zack is rude, thuggish, very slimy and mafia-esque, threatening and insulting. He's also something of a schemer, and perhaps even a little egotistical, which can lead to him being rather stubborn. As is the case with a lot of the show's characters, we obviously don't see all of these traits in a single episode. So let's take a look at all of his major appearances and see what we can find, starting with episode 1, Sunshine. This episode served as the series pilot, and actually manages to give us an idea of what most of the tugs in the show are like. Zack actually gets quite a bit of screen time in this one. At the Zero Fleet's briefing, we get his first line of dialogue where he acts vain in response to Captain Zero's comment about how the Z-Stacks are better looking than the stars.
You're a team, the best, better looking, more powerful, and dare I say, more devious.
I like that bit about better looking.
As we will see later on in the show, Zack will often deny his own shortcomings, which is something I've always interpreted as him wanting to seem as impressive as possible to Captain Zero. We see this when he and Zoran report about the Duchess arriving in port early.
You sure about this?
Seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah, we both seen it.
And it kind of works, given how Zero congratulates both him and Zoran that evening, even though it was really only Zoran that did much of anything. Take note of how the next day, he doesn't try to defend his mistake to Captain Zero when they get found out, unlike Zoran. What I find most interesting about Zack's appearance in this episode is that it's really the only time that he and Zoran are seen alone together. I also find it intriguing at how he mimics Zoran's behaviour. You could simply chop this up to the two of them being very similar, which is definitely true, but I also think that it goes a little deeper than that. You see, Zack actually sees himself as a potential leader for the Z-Stacks. At one point in the show's production, Zack and Zebedee had their personalities and roles in the show switched for unknown reasons. Furthermore, the Tugs publicity packet states that Zack, formerly Zebedee, would like to have taken over given half a chance. My interpretation of this is that Zack would act as Zoran's right-hand man, following his lead and learning what he could, whilst waiting for Zoran to lose his position. I doubt that this would have ever happened though, as Zoran is a much better fit as the show's primary antagonist. Plus, he's a lot more intelligent than Zack, and actually has a great deal of common sense, as he knows when it's actually more beneficial to play straight. Zach's next appearance is in Pirate, where he can be seen making fun of 10 Cents, implying that he's a criminal, to which 10 Cents responds with,
"Yeah, you two'd know all about that, wouldn't you, Zach?"
This doesn't really confirm or deny anything new, but it does reinforce what type of guy Zach is, as we now have an outsider acknowledging what he's known for. He doesn't do much in Trapped other than relay dialogue to Zug, so let's move on. He doesn't do all that much in Munitions either, except for this exchange between him and Zoran, which I find to be quite amusing.
Show them explosives don't scare us. If they come too close, just blow them up.
Feeling a little trigger happy there, Zach? He does also comment on how Big Mickey doesn't take orders from Blue Nose, but I mean, anyone could have said that. Everyone hates Blue Nose, so Zach being the one to mention this doesn't really mean much. High Tide is the closest we get to seeing some actual character development. We get to see Zach's attempt at being a schemer, but we also find out that he's having engine trouble. I like to think that Zach dismissing his ailment here is tied to his wanting to seem impressive to Captain Zero.
You should have had a scene too. Nothing wrong with it.
Like, he either doesn't want to come across as weak, or maybe he thinks that he'll stand out more to Zero if he manages to beat the stars whilst crippled. Either way, Zach comes up with the idea to head through the Canal as a shortcut in order to beat Big Mac and Warrior for the steel contract. Of course, he makes the fatal mistake of not accounting for the high tide until too late when Zebedee's rig collides with the railway bridge.
Seb! Reverse engines! Quick!
I guess you could say that this is a good example of why Zach could never truly replace Soren as the Z-Stack's leader, because the latter is much more calculated, and I seriously doubt that he would have made the same mistake. And finally, we have Jinxed. Zach has only one line of dialogue here, where he offers to sink Boomer.
See ya, Boomer. If you need any help sinking, let me know.
This doesn't add anything new, but it does go to show just how thuggish and uncaring Zach is. He outright offers to kill someone who is suicidal. Damn. Zach does appear several other times throughout the series, however, he has no dialogue, so there isn't really much point in going through these appearances. Considering that there were over 90 scripts written for Tugs, I'm sure that one of those might have given us something on Zach. However, in spite of that, I doubt that he was ever intended to go all that far. And that's okay, to be honest. Not every character needs a great deal of growth and development. Would I have been opposed to seeing more of Zach and what makes him tick? No, of course not. That being said, I'm also fine with what we got for him. Zach is clearly intended to be a ruffian of sorts. A gangster who wants to become something more, but realistically would never amount to being much more than a grunt. Hell, Zach's position as being the most mafia-like character is even reinforced in his facial design, which is apparently based on Edward G. Robinson, an actor who was well known for playing the role of gangsters in movies. Still, what kind of stories could we have seen with Zach? Naturally, I think the two most explorable elements to Zach's character are his faulty engine, as 1v1 Empire pointed out, but also, and perhaps more so, his desire for leadership. Hell, as D-Man Cluster 2631 mentioned, you could even combine the two if you really wanted to. A basic idea could be that Zoran is away for some reason, whether it be on contract or receiving repairs, and so Zach tries to fill in for him, but struggles to do so with his engine. As one of my commenters mentioned, which I will highlight in a bit, we would really see what makes Zach tick and what drives him. Zach does have the honour of being the protagonist of a great fan story, written by the one and only Barry Truck, called Adrift. I won't spoil the whole thing, but I will share with you the premise. One bleak evening during the winter, Zach is ordered by Zoran to patrol the harbour mouth and the estuary to keep an eye out for ships that need a tow, whilst the rest of the fleet work in the port. Zach isn't at all pleased until he spots a ship in the distance that seemingly pops up out of nowhere. After some very limited responses from the frozen vessel, who keeps begging for help, Zack eventually agrees to tow them in. However, every time he tries to, the mysterious vessel gets detached, with the tramper getting further and further away, with no explanation. Eventually, Hercules shows up and reveals the possibility that the ship may be otherworldly, as he too had once tried in vain to help it, among others that never succeeded or made it back. Eventually, Zack is forced to stubbornly admit that he shouldn't bother with it, all the while trying to hide his nerves. I think that this is a great story, and while you could maybe argue that most of the tugs from either fleet could have starred in this, I like the fact that the berry truck chose to use Zack. How this story would differ from character to character comes from how each of them would react to the information relayed to them by Hercules, who was also used perfectly here by the way. Very in line with his role in the show, particularly his role in Ghosts. Zack's reaction in this story is perfectly in line with his stubbornness, given how clearly he tries to cover up his nerves. I did make a community post a while back asking you guys what you all think of Zack, and Crowbar_Reed's comment about Zack being rather unhinged really caught my eye, where they mentioned that Zoran would hurt you in order to impress Captain Zero, whereas Zack would hurt you just because he wants to. Honestly, after looking at both of their personalities, I'd have to agree. Every single time that Zoran does something bad, he does it for a reason, a purpose. Zack does this most of the time, but not always, i.e. Boomer. Overall, I do think that Zack is something of an overlooked character. But you know what? Maybe that's a good thing. He served his purpose throughout the show, and that was enough. And at the very least, I can comfortably say I never found him boring. His voice actor, Sean Prendergast, did a great job of making Zack sound so gruff and thuggish. What do you guys think of Zack? Do you have any potential story ideas that you think would have fit his character? Be sure to let me know in the comments section down below. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed this one. Now until next time, I've been Cinders and Ashes UK, you've been awesome, and have a great day. Bye!